By the end of this video, you're going to learn what is form element, how to create a form in HTML, how to send data using get and post requests, what's the difference between get and post, and some bonus knowledge at the end. What is form? Let's see. A form is just a element in HTML that acts as a container for all your input fields or input elements, or of your I should say user input. So whenever you want to make a login form like I have made here, that's opened in the browser here, you want to store your input inside input elements inside of a form. And why would you do that? Form actually doesn't do anything special to the input elements themselves, but later down the line you can put in an input of type submit here, which is basically a button that if you click on, will the form, if it's wrapped in a form, it will submit basically all the information you had in those input fields to the server, so you can process this information on the server side later. Let me tell you how you can make a form inside of HTML. Create a form. So here I have opened just an empty folder inside my Visual Studio Code, which is called practice, as you can see. And here I'm going to make a new file, which will be my website basically. And it's just an HTML empty one. And I'm going to say, if you're using Emmet, you should write exclamation mark, and if you press enter and I close this Explorer, you get a boilerplate HTML. And here I want to save this, and inside of my body, to create a form, you just need to type form, and if you press enter, this form will pop up. And I'm going to delete this action attribute for now, and because I'm going to talk about it later. So here you may, as I spoke about previously, you can add in some inputs, and you usually want to add some inputs, or whatever way you may take in some user input from the user. And here, instead of just text, I'm going to say email. That's another type you have in input, and I'm going to give it a placeholder of email again. And you need to, of course, add in those inside your form if you're making, for example, a login form, because later down the line we're going to submit them. We want to be able to submit them, all the information like the email, password, etc., to the server, and that's why you wrap them inside a form. So I'm going to continue adding this, and I'm going to add a input for password, and here you want to add in another placeholder just so it's more readable. And another very important thing is that you add in this input of type submit now. And if I save this, refresh, I'm going to get, of course, my input of type email and password here with a placeholder of the same name, and of course a button of submit. And I can, of course, change the value or the name of this button by just using this value attribute and saying login, which would make much more sense to me. And now if you press on submit, all this information that you've typed in here, hopefully in your email and password, will get submitted to the server. And now on to the more fun stuff. How do we actually make a request to the server? So now if you type in your mail here, like let's say codenerd@gmail.com, this is not my mail, but just saying that, and here my password, like codenerd, by default you actually have the option to send now this information to the server using get request. But if you want to change the method you're using to send those information, you can use the attribute method inside this form. So if I type in method, it takes a string which can be get, Remember, this is the first one, this is the default one. You can use post method, you can use delete, or you can use put. I think these are all. And another one, there are two method is one of the two most important attributes that you must know in form, and I'm going to use get for now. And the second one is action, and this action specifies, by the way, method specifies the HTTP method that you use, that the browser uses to send this information to the server. And action actually specifies which page or route on the server handles this information. And in our case, because we have a server, of course, but in our case it will be just this page, and this can also be slash something. As I said, it can be a route on the server, and I'm going to go into depth in later at the end of this video about this, and I'll give you guys an example of this, but for now it will be index.html. And you'll see now, if I save this and just type in some mails here, let's say cgmail.com, and here's some password of pw, let's just say. And if I press on login now, you see this will start refreshing, basically sending the request. And if I expand this, I would not get nothing. I'm not sure why. Oh, I forgot to tell you something. So basically, whenever you're sending data to the server, you usually want to give this name attribute on your inputs, on the data that you're sending. So I'm going to give this a name of email. And you may be wondering, why would I have to do this? It's because this way you're sending the data, basically, and this way you can identify this input element when you're on the server side, and you can take in whatever value this input element has. So you can say on the server side, get me this input element that has a name email, and you can take its value, and that's basically how you retrieve or get the information on the server side. And here I'm also going to give a name of, let's just say pw, because it's easier. I'm going to save, and I'm going to say cgmail.com, and I'm going to say just pw and 1. And if I press now on login, and if I expand this, you see that our URL changed. And now I'm getting, this is very important, and with get request, remember here we're using a get request, we're sending information to the server using the query string. And here is, as you can see, the query string is defined, its syntax is first of all a question mark, then the name of our parameter. We are basically sending the data as a parameter, and the name of our parameter is email, because remember we specified the name email here, and you can change this to whatever you like, but I'm going to set it as email. Then this value, the value of this parameter name will be C, and this thing I have written in my email box, input element. And now for the second parameter, you separate this with this ampersand sign. And again, we have the same syntax, the parameter name equal to its value. And I've written, you didn't saw it because it was covered like this, but I wrote pw1. I'm going to have an image in the description so you can see the syntax of a query string. And you can see that you've successfully sent a get request if you right click or inspect, and this will pull up, of course, our lovely Google Chrome DevTools. And if I expand this, going into network, and oops, I'm going to actually send another request, and with this email, and again pw1, going to say login. And here if I go inside this thing, you'll see this is basically our request that we've made. You can see by the email here, by the query string, and here you can see our request URL, how we send an email parameter with the value of this email, and the request method was get. And here again you have this query string parameters, the email with this value and pw parameter with this value. And if you want to send, let's say, a post request to the server instead of a get, you just write in here post, and if I save this, type in some email here, and let's say my password is pw1, and if I click on login, my form will get submitted. And this will not work because the browser cannot now, without a server sort of that processes the request, cannot handle the request if it's post. But you can see that we did actually send a post request. If you go again inside of network in Google Chrome DevTools, and actually I'll just do this one time. I'm going to say pw1 login, and if I go up here in this red thing, and it's red because we didn't process the request, it says we get the status calls of 405, which is method not allowed, but we did actually send a post request. And in the body, we this time sent in the body data, some data, and these were our parameters and their corresponding values. So what's the difference between get and post? I mean, we already saw that with both of them you can send data to the server, but now that's actually the first difference, is how you send the data. With get request, if I type in get here, and here I refresh the page, and if I type in some email here with a password pw1, if I press on login, you'll get this that we are sending this data through a query string, is this thing called, through the URL basically. And that's the first difference between get and post. With get, you send data to the server, you submit data to the server using query string, but in post request you do not. And the thing here with the query string is that it's usually very bad practice to send some sensitive data like the password, and for this purpose you would use post request. Also, the second thing is that you're very limited in the amount of data you can send to the server in the query string. So I think in the query string you have only this number of characters allowed minus the number of characters in the actual path. So this is our path, so basically 2048 I think it was, minus those characters. Another difference you have is that with get request, usually just, yeah, you may send some data through the query string, but usually use a get request to get some data from the server. And with post requests it's different. With post requests you usually send those type of requests to create something on the server side, not to get some data, but to change the database basically and add something on the database. For example, you want to use a post request if you're doing a login form like I am here. So another difference is that in post request you actually send data through the request body. You put in your data in the request body instead of the query string like you do in get request. And because of this, you actually are not limited in size of how much data you can send to the server. You can send as much as you like. Now what I will show you is I'll open here a real world example project that I have, that I'm working on, with a full front end and a back end. So it's not this sort of project where we only have a front end. So here in my real world project, on the front end I have just only this index.html. It's a simple project. And on the back end I use Python with Flask, if you have heard about it. And the server is basically just this file. And we'll start with the front end, and I want to show you, friends, in this form. And as you can see, in the action I have not specified a file, but instead a route on the server, and I use a post method here. So if I go inside my server file here, I can see that I have a route, which basically the browser here says I'm listening on the route /API. And here in my form I specified that, hey, if when you click on this submit button in this form, please submit those this information here I have in my input to this /API, and the server will handle it. So if I go up here, and by the way, actually I need to show you here that in the input again we have a name attribute, which on the server side I said we will identify that we use this to identify this input element, and here the name is hash from file. And if I go in my server in the API where I'm handling my request, I'm just saying request.form.get and the name of the input element, which is hash from file, and that's basically how I'm getting the value of the element. You shouldn't remember the syntax. This is just an example to illustrate how you would in the real world use form and on the front end, and how you would handle the information on the back end. So if you like videos like this one, make sure to show me some love by subscribing here. Thank you all so much for watching, and peace out.